Hello, everyone. I'm Guy Rolnick, clinical professor of strategic management at Chicago Booth. Today, the Stigler Center for the Study of the Economy and the State is hosting a special conversation with Olga Rudenko of the Kyiv Independent, joining us from Ukraine, and Ed Luce of the Financial Times, who will be moderating from Washington, DC. Olga was a student in my class just 3 months ago, taking courses with fellow Chicago Booth students as part of the Stigler Center's Journalist in Residence program. While she was in the program, she found out that when she comes back to Kyiv, she will have to start an entrepreneurial career if she wants to lead an independent newsroom. She went back to Kyiv and started a new independent news outlet. Olga thought that she has very formidable opponents, oligarchs and politicians. Vladimir Putin was not yet in the picture in his current role. The Journalist in Residence program provides a transformative learning experience for journalists worldwide. Participants spend a quarter on campus in Chicago, taking courses, collaborating with peers, and networking with the university's scholars and students, who also gain from the perspectives and insights of the journalists. These interactions forge valuable connections and fellow gain in-depth knowledge of the economy and markets, enriching their work. To that end, we are grateful for Olga for taking time to speak to the Chicago Booth community on her perspective on the war her and her team are covering from the front lines. Before we begin, please note, as usual, views expressed by guests are their own, not those of the Stigler Center or the University of Chicago. We hope that you will join us for more upcoming conversations, so please check out our website as well as our publication, promarket.org, and subscribe to our Capital Isn't podcast. And now please allow me to briefly introduce our guests. Olga Rudenko is the editor-in-chief of the Kyiv Independent, which is Ukraine's English language media outlet, created by journalists who were dismissed from the Kyiv Post for defending editorial independence. Olga had started at the Kyiv Post in 2011, and in 2017, she became its deputy chief editor. She has also written for other publications such as USA Today and the Washington Times. Ed Luce is the US national editor and columnist at the Financial Times. He is also co-author of the Swamp Notes newsletter, which covers the intersection of money, power, and politics in America. Before that, he was the FT's Washington bureau chief and South Asia bureau chief. He is also the author of several acclaimed books, the latest being The Retreat of Western Liberalism. I hear he's working on a new book, and we look forward to it and Ed's keen insight. And now, without further ado, I turn it over to our guest. Thank you. Ed?
Thank you very much, Guy. It's always a pleasure to do stuff with the Stigler Center, but it's a great pleasure and honor, I think, to talk to Olga at a time like this, 13 days into this war. I mean, I imagine Olga is the editor of and co-founder of the Kyiv Independent, having resigned, as Guy just outlined, from the Kyiv Post because of proprietary interference 3 months ago. The last thing you were hoping for is a war, but you are in this extraordinary situation there in Ukraine. You're managing reporters, you're getting stuff out to the world. Talk to us a little bit about what it is like, just from the point of view of being a journalist and an editor in this war environment.
Thank you, Ed. Yeah, so when the war started 13 days ago, our news outlet was 3 months old, and in general, we are a young and relatively I might say mostly inexperienced team in the sense of management issues and so on. And personally, it's been quite a challenge just to make the right decisions and to navigate this situation. We prioritize the team's safety, which is why most of the team is now in relatively safe places in Ukraine, central and western Ukraine, while a small reporting team stays in Kyiv and reports on the ground. Kyiv is right now quite a hotspot, and it's quite risky to stay there because the city might, it is suffering airstrikes every day, and it might. It's very dangerous. It's very risky for anybody to stay there. So, but the team has been tremendous throughout this. There is a general sense of I want to say duty in covering this, and we have been very blessed with the enormous amount of support that we have been getting from the international community, from our readers. We launched a fundraiser to keep the team going and to to cover the possible expenses that have to do with relocation that we might have to take on later. And the fundraiser showed that there's a huge support for us. And actually, we started the second one that is not for us, but for other Ukrainian media who are struggling because they are not as lucky as us to have this access to international audience and their support. So both fundraisers are doing pretty good. We also have seen amazing growth, of course, of the audience. We just to give you some numbers, a couple of days before the war started, our Twitter account had something like 30,000 followers, and right now we're at 1.7 million, and we really we have been quite successful in establishing ourselves as the go-to local source of the news about Ukraine in English. So that's I mean, it's great, but it's a lot of it's a big responsibility, and we have, since the war started, we have prioritized getting. We of course don't cover anything but the war right now. There's nothing else happening in Ukraine. There are no cultural topics. There's no politics. There's just this is survival mode for the country and for us too. And we part of the team spent the first several days of the war relocating, getting their families to safe places and so on. But now everybody is mostly settled in their temporary locations, and we are trying to go back into like more sort of a more normal mode of working. And while we prioritize getting fast news to the people, we are now we now have the capacity to also do more feature stories and reporting on the ground, showing, among other things, the human tragedy of the war. So that's what we have been up to.
Now, I imagine you've got, or at least thinking of, some contingency plans for if you have to leave Ukraine, for operating, I don't know, from Warsaw or somewhere. Is that on your mind too?
It is. It has been on our minds ever since before the war. We did put some contingency plans together before it started, because we have been, we had been getting these warnings from the West that that it's not just a bluff, and Putin really is going to invade. To be honest, when we were discussing our contingency plans, I was absolutely certain, well, not absolutely, but I was 80% certain that we would not need them. As were most people around us. Pretty much everyone was sure that the whole buildup of the military force around Ukraine is just an intimidation campaign to force us or the West to fall for some conditions, and basically just a negotiation leverage for Vladimir Putin. But as we now know, it wasn't. And yeah, so when we were discussing our contingency plans, one thing that I was always the most afraid of is being the team, or the majority of the team, being cut off the internet, because we publish online, and that would mean that we can't work, we can't cover the war, we're cut off, which was part of the reason, the major part of the reason why I personally left Kyiv, and why I recommended people to get out to safety, number one, but also just to the necessity to stay connected, because honestly, I was almost sure that, like, the biggest thing that I feared was that they will try to cut off mobile networks and internet connection, which has not yet happened in Kyiv, but it has happened in some cities that have been occupied in the south of the country. So yeah, we made emphasis on staying in touch, which is why we have a couple of people abroad. We have a couple of people in Northern America on our team. So we made sure that everybody has access to the website, that everybody knows who the passwords, that everybody can, you know, if everybody in Kyiv just goes offline, those people who are away can pick it up and start publishing something on the website. So that was a big part of the plan. And yes, we did think of relocating temporarily, but to be honest, the option of setting up an office in Warsaw or somewhere else is something that I would really hope we don't have to do. I personally, you know, live in Ukraine is the last thing I would want to do for as long as possible. I think we need to stay here, even if it's in Western Ukraine. So it's mostly on my mind to probably try to set up a temporary office in Western Ukraine in the nearest future. But we have been delaying those plans because we have been trying to wait and see whether we actually would need it, whether Kyiv would become a little more safe, whether we can return. So there's still a lot of moving parts in this thing. But I mean, relocating out of Ukraine is we would go. This is the last resort. We would do that only if it's absolutely unsafe to stay in Ukraine anywhere.
Now, in a moment, I'm going to get onto the actual war and what's happening and what you expect to happen. But just to stick for a second to your ability to do your job, this critically important role that the Kyiv Independent is playing in being a portal so many of us are using to see what's happening in your country. I presume you have good contacts with the Zelensky administration and the Ukraine intelligence services in terms of your own sort of risk assessment. And I also assume there is a very real possibility that since this is also an information war, that Russian forces might have plans to target independent media outlets.
Yeah, well, there was this report that was circulating about a week or 2 weeks before the war actually started that Russians have a sort of a kill list of people they're going to target, Ukrainians they're going to target if they invade. And while nobody that I know actually saw the list, there's a general belief that a lot of people on the list are probably journalists and activists. I don't know if the list even exists for sure, and if it does, how serious they might be about it. I do know that I do realize that we are now like a high-profile target for cyber attacks. We have been experiencing some of that with the website, not to a very serious extent so far. There were some instances when the website was down and our developers were not 100% sure whether it is an attack on the website or just the flow of traffic is just so big that the website goes down. we are taking all the measures possible to just ensure the cybersecurity, having two-factor verification for all the accounts we're using for all journalists and so on, which we have been, doing even before the invasion, of course. But in general, yeah, we do understand that we are potentially a target for them. But so are all the journalists in Ukraine right now, not us specifically. All the journalists are potentially target.
Fair enough, but I imagine that is a consistent thought at the back of your mind. I mentioned the Zelensky administration in Ukraine, and I saw that you, a few weeks before the invasion, you had an op-ed piece in the New York Times saying that he was a pretty mediocre and ineffectual leader, and that's the thought that a lot of us had, in fact, from outside of Ukraine, a much less granular picture, but that's the vague impression that I think I certainly had, and therefore have been stunned by his effectiveness and courage and example as a wartime leader, like Churchill with a social media account. I would imagine you're as surprised as everybody else, although with a lot more inside knowledge. Could you talk a little bit about that metamorphosis?
Of course, I'm actually so happy that you brought up this op-ed because yeah, I was asked by the Times to do a piece on Zelensky's effectiveness as the president several like a week before the invasion. It was published. And of course, I did my best. It's an honest and detailed review of his presidency up until the war, which, as you said, I concluded was mediocre, and I still think I was right to say that. But of course, several days after that, he becomes the international hero, which leads to I'm still getting emails, quite hateful emails sometimes from people responding to that article, but now basing their response on the image of Zelensky now. So people from New Jersey and Massachusetts are lecturing me about being a traitor of my country for writing that.
Yeah, so these are emails from people who probably hadn't even heard of Zelensky.
Exactly. They just learned of his existence. Yes. I try to be understanding about that. I did snap and I respond to one of them, but I'm not proud of that. I was as everybody. I was stunned by the as you put it, metamorphosis of Zelensky. I mean, he's not the first example in history of somebody who is not a very effective, not a very good leader in the peaceful time, not a very good governor of a country, but turns out to be a very good commander-in-chief, which is I've been thinking a lot in the in the past days about what exactly what in Zelensky warranted this transformation, like what allowed for it. And I think well, one thing that I noticed is the Zelensky that you see now, if you compare it to Zelensky 3 weeks ago, they look like two different people. But if you compare Zelensky now to Zelensky of 2019, when he was campaigning for presidency, that's the same person. So he is now in the same mode that he was in when he was campaigning. It was a very short campaign, it was a 3 months campaign. But it was a very effective one with a very good social media presence. And the same sort of like ordinary guy speaking the hard truth kind of thing. And this challenge of the war, it did put him in a different mode. And I think part of it is that everybody's interests are so aligned right now. For example, Zelensky did not was not very good at dealing with criticisms. he was very, very sensitive to hard-hitting questions at press conferences. He would often, like, go into a rant against journalists at press conferences for asking something about corruption and so on. He does not have to deal with anything like that now. Now everybody, including the most critical journalists in the country and including his political opponents, everybody is backing him. Everybody is completely 100% united behind Zelensky, and I think this is part of what is feeding this great performance that he's putting out. And yeah, there's that, and also he he became this almost like pop cultural phenomenon with the Captain Ukraine thing and so on. And sometimes I see it reported in Western media that Zelensky's courage is inspiring Ukrainians. It's only partly true. I think it's also true, maybe even more true, that it's Ukrainians who are inspiring him, because it takes, of course, a lot of courage to do what he's doing, to stay in Kyiv, and despite all the reports of the possible assassination attempts, to be where he is and to be doing what he's doing to challenge Vladimir Putin like that. It takes a lot of courage. But you look at the dozens of viral videos of regular Ukrainians who are standing up armless and trying to stop Russian tanks, like literally, like, just trying to stop them, or screaming at armed Russian soldiers who are occupying their cities. I think it takes more courage to do that than to do what Zelensky is doing. So I think it goes from regular Ukrainians, and that's what's inspiring the president.
I would imagine that there are genuine concerns, given the important role Zelensky is playing, not just in Ukraine, but as an international rallying point for the Ukrainian resistance, that the possibility that there is that kill list that you referred to, and that he is #1 on that kill list, and that therefore some of these broadcasts he's been doing where he says, I am here on Bankover Street, I am not moving, I am not afraid, that there is a risk factor that all courageous wartime leaders take on, but there is a risk factor there that he will goad the Russians into killing him. Obviously I don't want to predict something so horrific, but that has to be at the back of everybody's minds, that there is a risk there.
It is, of course, this is something that, of course, everybody is afraid of happening, but at the same time, yes, by doing what he's doing, if he was the #1 target in the first days of war, after all that he's said and done, after how he became this exemplary leader, I think it was Polish Newsweek who put him on the cover this week and called him the real leader of the free world. After all that, I think the priority of the Russian regime targeting him, that it must have been, if they wanted to kill him in the beginning, they must want to kill him even more right now. And we, of course, all pray that it doesn't happen. However, if it comes to that, I don't know if Russians understand that it's not gonna change everything. It's people who are fighting are not gonna put down arms, and it's not, Russia may equal Putin, but Ukraine does not equal Zelensky. So that's how, that's
very well put. That's very well expressed. That's a good way of putting it. Now, another sort of really surprising aspect of the last couple of weeks is the ineffectualness, the amateurism, the lack of morale, the poor supply chains, the non-existent planning that we're seeing with the Russian military. Tell me, what kind of things are you seeing on the ground? Is this a correct reading, or are we just filtering what we want to hear, and that things are still going to get much worse, that the Russians will regroup and become more efficient as this operation progresses?
I'm really trying to keep sort of a sober look at this, a sober lens that I'm looking through at this, at all the news about the ineffectiveness of the Russian army. It does look like it's not what anybody expected it to be. It's not. I don't think anybody expected it to be as disorganized and falling in such presumably great numbers. We of course, we are probably months, if not years, away from knowing the real casualties on both sides, because Ukraine reported today that 12,000 Russian troops are killed. Russia several days ago said that 500 are killed, Russian troops, I mean. The truth might be somewhere in the middle, because it is understandable that Ukrainian side would try to. They also saying 12,000.
Yeah.
Really? They admitting that they have 12,000 killed?
Not today, even tomorrow. It was reported about more than 10,000 militaries plus 1,000 of private companies who also.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that was a. I'm sitting in the corner of in a smoking room of a local restaurant, and this was the regular customer just contributing to what I was saying. He said that Russia is also mentioning the 12,000 killed now. I don't know, I didn't get if it was like on the Ukrainian side that they claim it or not. But yeah, back to what I was saying is we don't know the exact numbers, and we of course are mostly getting our information from what the Ukrainian government is saying. We're trying to verify when possible, but more often it's not possible. So it is definitely true that the Russian army is not proving to be effective. But the question that is always in the back of my mind is are they truly doing their best now? Are they truly going full force on us? Could it be that they are sending the sort of the mediocre or the weaker kind of troops at Ukraine now to exhaust us, and then at some point they send the more organized and better equipped units of the army. That's just something that's a scary thought that I have in the back of my mind always. But it's been 13 days now. They don't get any better. I believe that the US said that they already sent in 100% of the troops that they have gathered near Ukraine's borders prior to the invasion. And the Ukrainian army has been, the military has been doing, I think, better than most people expected in fighting back. Because as you said, they are motivated and the Russians are not. The Russians are sent. Many of them don't even know what they're doing here. Many of them say that they were only told that they're actually entering Ukraine like hours before it happened. They thought that they were near Ukraine's borders for either intimidation or military drills, and then they're sent into Ukraine. They have no reason to be there. They don't know why they're there. They're not motivated. They don't have any personal reason to be there. The Ukrainian soldiers have all the reasons to be fighting back. It is their land, it is their country. It is very clear who the enemy is, and it makes a lot of difference. It turned out, the motivation of the troops. And now we are hearing reports that Belarus might join the war officially. Of course, they're still kind of in the war already, because they are allowing Russians to basically use their roads and their land to launch their missiles at Ukraine and so on. But Belarus there is a consistent rumor they might actually join and send their troops in. But from all the reports that we have been getting, including from sources in Belarus, everybody says that the Belarusian troops are even less motivated than Russians, and they just don't want to go. They don't have any belief at all in the as Putin calls it, like Nazi regime in Ukraine, the insane myth that he is selling to the Russian people. So the Belarusians do not believe it at all, and if they join, I don't know how it might go, because they're even less motivated.
Yeah, you have to wonder. I mean, if Belarusian troops are the answer to Russia's problems, you have to wonder what the question is.
To be honest, I think that the whole reason for Russia to involve Belarus is not to really to get any additional force, because the Belarusian army is small compared to both Ukraine and Russia. And I think the assessment is that they can only send something like 30,000 troops. That's like the maximum that they can send in. But I think it's mostly for Russia about just kind of getting Belarus officially involved in this, and just making Belarus a complete pariah forever in the Western world, and just strengthening the dependence of the Belarusian regime on Russia.
That makes total sense. Now, we have to assume that one of the reasons the Russian military has been performing so badly is because its planning was based on false intelligence about the kind of reception they would get if they went into Ukraine. And so that leads to the rather disturbing conclusion that Putin is not getting accurate intelligence, and therefore is not making rational decisions based on full knowledge. Is there any reason to think that he's now going to be getting better intelligence, and therefore, perhaps making decisions that are darker for Ukraine's near future than it has been so far during this war?
Not really. There are consistent reports and rumors and so leaked memos, which we don't know if they're true or not, coming from Russian intelligence and FSB, security bureau, that allege that that indeed, as you said, the decision to go into this invasion for Russia was made using incorrect, non-objective data and reports and projections. And the reason is, of course, that in an authoritarian state, you as a person who works in the intelligence, and you're whoever who needs to write the report, you have all the reasons to write not an objective report, but write something that your leaders want to hear. You have all the reasons to try to please them, and to kind of tweak the facts and make it present it as, for example, present the invasion of Ukraine as easier than it actually is. And I honestly think that part of the reason for that is also the corruption, the pervasive corruption at every level, where they throw billions of dollars at propaganda, and part of that money is stolen along the way, for example. And the quality of the propaganda that you then come out with, that, for example, is targeting eastern Ukraine, the occupied regions of eastern Ukraine, is not as good as you would hope it would be. And then when it comes to the actual invasion, you hope that the regular people of eastern Ukraine take up arms and go fight Kyiv, and they don't. Turns out they don't actually believe the puppet governments that the Kremlin installed. So I think there's corruption at every level that is sort of chipping off from the effectiveness of the system. I also wanted to note there's a good thought that I heard yesterday from there is a Russian writer, Grigory Chartishvili, who is better known as Boris Akunin, who's like the biggest star of the Russian literature, and he's a big critic of Putin. He has fled Russia years ago. He lives in Europe, and he in a recent interview that was recorded after the invasion, and he was sharing his thoughts on that, and he was asked something about Putin, and he said that something that I think makes a lot of sense. He said that Putin comes from KGB, and people from KGB, they from like special sources like that, they are trained not to think strategically. They're trained to think they're trained to solve the tasks that are put in front of them. They're not trained to come up with ideas, if you will. They are trained to solve issues, solve problems. And this writer argues that this whole training kind of kills the strategic thinking in a person, which I thought was an interesting thought.
That is an interesting thought, and it certainly fits with the facts so far in this war. Now, I've been quite surprised by the strength and unity of the West's reaction so far, particularly countries like Germany that have, changed decades of policy caution about sending arms, for example, to a neutral country, to a non-alliance country. But I also notice, and I understand the frustration of Ukrainians from the president downwards, and including you, I see from your Twitter account, at the West's reluctance to declare a no-fly zone, for example, over Ukraine. I guess my question to you on this is, do you understand the Western reluctance here? Do you understand that it would be quite probably interpreted as an act of direct military intervention and therefore lead to war between NATO and Russia? Do you think that is a valid reason for us to pause before doing something like that?
I completely understand that. I understand the thinking behind refusing to introduce a no-fly zone, the NATO countries are also hesitating, not giving Ukraine the fighter jets that the Ukrainian leadership asked for as a alternative to a no-fly zone. However, I cannot agree with the line of thinking where if Putin says that he's going to interpret it this way and the West will just bow and saying, okay, we agree with your interpretation, because it's just postponing the problem. It's not solving the problem, it's postponing it, and it's hoping that if Putin goes further, if he takes Ukraine, and then in some time he wants to take the Baltics too, which he will definitely want to, then it's just thinking that it will not happen in the current leader's lifetime or political lifetime, and it's just delaying the problem, and it's just they're gonna have to deal with it eventually, today or tomorrow, in 15 years. This is of course, for everybody in Ukraine, we are getting emotional about it for very normal reasons, because every single day we see photos and videos of the children being killed. My morning today started was reading the news and watching videos about a bombing of a northern city called Sumy, and there were actual 21 people were killed, including 2 children, and there were actual videos of the bodies of 2 boys, I don't know, maybe 8 years old, being dragged from under the debris of their house, covered in blood and dust. And we see it every day, every single day. We see images of Ukrainian children being killed, and you just can't help but thinking, if this was happening, if these children lived not in northern Ukraine, if they lived in northern Germany or France or Italy or the UK or the US, it would have been a different picture. I mean, the direction would have been different. So you can't help but just think, how come that the lives of children have different value because of where they were born. And in this, I completely understand how emotional Zelensky gets when he addresses every day. He does a video address to the West asking for no-fly zone or for the fighter jets to be sent here. And yeah, well, right before joining this call, I learned that the Irish Times published the internal communications of the United Nations, where they banned their staff from calling the events in Ukraine invasion or war. They are recommended to be using the word conflict. I have some opinions about that, but I think if I say what I want to say, this video will not be distributed. So.
Well, I suspect it would be, but I imagine we can guess and probably share your opinions on that. Do you have any idea of whether a solution will be found to get these 29 MiG fighters jets across from Poland to Ukraine? Because clearly that's something the West ought to and could be delivering on.
I think I do hope that the solution will be found, and the things we have been hearing about, like, we want to give you the planes, but there are no pilots in Ukraine who know how to operate this kind of planes. They are very weak, and I'm sure we would be able to find some pilots. And I think this decision is kind of a litmus test on, like, if they don't even give the planes to Ukraine, then it's like a verdict to the West's ability to defend its values. I mean, it may be a little naive or even cheesy to be speaking about values, but I really sincerely, and I think it's not just because I'm Ukrainian, but I sincerely believe that if the West allows Putin to just destroy Ukraine, like he's been doing for days, destroying Ukrainian cities, killing children and civilians, the West loses something very important. Not like an ally Ukraine, not in terms of Russia will come closer to the borders, not in any of those senses, but the West will lose something, some moral ground, something very, very important, something that's at the center of the self, I guess, identification of the identity of the Western world. That's just my opinion.
And there is another dimension, international dimension, going on right now, and I know you've reported on it, of foreign fighters heeding Zelensky's call to join the fight. And I've seen reports of up to 40,000 making their way to Ukraine. Is that happening, and what kind of impact do you think that could have?
I think it can make a difference in it demonstrates to the West that there is that, and to Putin maybe too, that even if the West would not get into this war on Ukraine's behalf and would not defend Ukraine, there's still many regular people there who are willing to get into the fight. I think it's very I think for regular Ukrainians and for Ukrainians who are in the military, it's supporting them on some level. So, like, knowing that somebody wants to get into this fight for you, you're not completely alone. At least there are some individual foreigners who are getting in, and we have been at the Kyiv Independent, we have been getting lots and lots of emails and social media messages from people like that who want to come to Ukraine to fight. They have sometimes misunderstood who we are and asked us to broker that for them, like to give them a visa or something. So yeah, we see that firsthand, that there's a huge interest from foreigners to join us in Ukraine.
Okay, well, in a minute, I'm going to let you carry on with your very important day job, although I see, of course, evening is falling there in Ukraine. But let me ask you where you see this. We've talked about what you'd like to see happen. Where do you forecast, just analytically, from the position you're sitting in and this critical role your newspaper's playing, what do you foresee happening over the coming weeks?
That's the most difficult question that can be. I don't think that anybody with any level of access to information can answer that. I definitely hope for there to be ceasefire just to stop the bombings of civilian areas. However, unfortunately, for now I don't see signs of Putin wanting to step back and to try to get out of it. There's some hope that they will try to, because a couple of days ago Russia started talking about how successful they have been in destroying Ukrainian military infrastructure, saying that it's almost completely destroyed. And since they announced it as a campaign to demilitarize Ukraine, to disarm Ukraine, basically, there was some hope here that maybe they will now use it as a pretext for retreat, just to get out and say that the special operation was successful and we destroyed the military infrastructure. But to be honest, I don't think that it's in the psychology of Vladimir Putin to retreat in that way, because it would be obvious for everybody that they have been defeated. I do hope that it happens, but unfortunately, I can't say that I see any signs. I'm afraid that Russia has the capacity to keep throwing more troops at Ukraine and keep trying to exhaust us, and maybe wait for get a couple of military victories and try to get a better negotiation position. So in short, I really hope that it ends as soon as possible, but objectively I don't really see signs how that can happen in the next couple of weeks.
Well, on that rather sober note, thank you, Olga. I mean, it's fascinating to talk to you, and I'm sure you know already, but a lot of people outside Ukraine, and I'm sure within, are relying on you to continue doing this courageous journalism that we're seeing, and of course, share all the wishes that you've just expressed. So do keep safe and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.